All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to day two of the Meredith Fellows Implementation Conference 2026. We are here to talk about, let me get to the next slide, the role of performance assessment in the CTC accreditation system. Um, my name is Marissa Luna Lopez. I'm a consultant in the Division of Research, Evaluation, an assessment, and I'm part of the performance assessment team. And we are still getting used to these new terms because we had a bit of a reorganization here at the CTC. But I did put in there that we're part of the educator quality branch. And so, Jake, if you want to say hello.
Hi, everyone. Yes, and I'm getting used to the acronym too. Luckily, I've got it in my little screen here. Division of Standards, Accreditation, and Workforce Investment.
And
Thanks,
if you
Marissa.
could, maybe in the chat, just say hello and say where you're from, so that way we can see who's in the room. Um, but yeah, absolutely. Welcome. So again, today we'll be discussing the role of performance assessment in the accreditation system, how to use this to drive um, some of these conversations that happen around continuous improvement. Looking at the common standards, the accreditation team, some program specific requirements. Jake is going to talk about some of the accreditation data dashboards. And if we have time, hopefully we will, we'll take a look at some performance assessment data that is in that we shared recently at the coordinator meetings and model how some conversations can happen when looking at some of those rubric specific information and data. Right. So, performance assessment data and accreditation, what story does it tell? And I was thinking about when I was working on my dissertation, we saw this image and it was like a bunch of Legos and they were all and they talked about like this is all data and they're just all these Legos all together. And then they sorted them and by color and that is sorted data. And then they built something out of the data and talked about how data put together in different ways can definitely tell a story. And performance assessment data it is supposed to support the understanding of the knowledge and skills necessary for beginning educators, and it's a reflection of their preparation. Truly, um, opportunities for support, how candidates are guided through, and the we get a lot of questions this year, especially around candidates in completing performance assessment, and it is intended to be done as part of a program. Candidates are not intended to say, here's your performance assessment, go away for 6 weeks and come back and let me know how you did. It's really supposed to be a hand in glove partnership between the candidate and their faculty, their mentors, their district employed supervisors or cooperating teachers as they complete this work. And it absolutely must be their work, but it is made better by the partnership between experienced educators and the new educator as they are collaborating. And so that is why it could be a major reflection of their preparation. Also, candidates are candidates and they are going to put forward their best work. And so there's a difference between what we say and what people understand. And we do absolutely understand that piece. And so looking at data as one point, as one piece, looking at the whole puzzle during the accreditation cycle is going to be important.
Okay. So, real quick before I start too, just want to highlight there's a few other CTC consultants in the room. Just wanted to give a shout out to them. Bronwyn is here, Elizabeth is here, and Debbie just joined as well. So nice to see you all. Okay, so yeah, as Marissa talked about, This session is about thinking about the accreditation cycle and performance assessment and that link there. So this next two slides talk about kind of a little more broadly, where does performance assessment show up in the standards? So there's mentions of candidate support in the common standards for all of the programs in the unit. There's discussion of continuous improvement. Um, so for continuous improvement, right? The understanding is that you're looking at data, you're regularly analyzing that data and understanding, are there changes? Are there any shifts that you need to do in order to address any of the data you're seeing? And so, of course, that would include performance assessment data. Um, the coursework, of course, is looked at in the standards and during accreditation, so is it addressing the TPEs or the CAPEs, and how that is also part of performance assessment. You're driving, right, Marissa? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, let me
Okay.
know when you're ready to go to the next slide.
Oh yeah, great. In the program standards, you see standards around clinical practice. You see things related to the logistics of implementing the TPA or APA. Um, and that also includes thinking about how is preparation for those performance assessment embedded into the program. Getting more specific, we've got the new literacy standard, which isn't it's not so new anymore, right? It's year two of implementing it, but we just completed the certification of programs for the literacy standard. So, as it's measured in the LPA, our candidates getting what's required from the new literacy TPE and um, also the literacy standard, and then working towards the new math requirements and what will be required in that performance assessment.
Mhm. And
So
I
yeah,
think
go
a
ahead.
big point, I would say a big part of what I was probably stumbling over and saying earlier was that, like I said, the performance assessment was not designed to be done without faculty support. And so, by placing a candidate in a strong clinical practice setting where they will have the opportunity to demonstrate competencies by explicitly addressing supporting candidates through the performance assessment, and many programs do this in different ways. And that's what is so I think good about the standard. It allows for programs to be within themselves and do what works for them to support their candidates. Some candidates get their performance assessment preparation through a specific class in their course of study. Some get their support during a seminar that is added to additional coursework. Every program does so in a different way, and especially and also depending upon the pathway. If they are a traditional student teaching program, if they are an intern program, there may be different points along the way for completing both TPA and APA. And I've also heard from a lot of programs about reordering APA cycles depending upon what is being taught to make it authentic to that clinical practice placement. And so understanding that there is flexibility, but that there needs to be the evidence in standards is going to be an important component piece of how PA data will show up in the accreditation cycle.
Okay, so if we go to the next slide, we're getting more specific about the language within the standards that you're addressing. So, raise of hands real quick of everyone in the room. Raise your hand or give a little symbol if you're working on your common standards submission for your institution, or if you've recently done it in the last year or two. I see Gordon, Crystal, great. Probably others who've got their hands up. So this is the specific language on this slide. Okay, so Common Standard 2 is all about candidate recruitment and support. We underlined there the evidence of progress in meeting competencies is consistently used for candidate guidance and support efforts. There's also a part of Common Standard 2 that's about identifying candidates that need additional support. So, a piece of that data is understanding where are candidates in relation to their performance assessment. And on the next slide, it should say, if you go to the next slide, Marissa, kind of what the team is looking for. Yeah, Carrie, did you have a question about this one? Hi.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, I was just responding to
Oh,
your previous question.
okay, great, great, great. Let's see. Carrie from Humphreys University. Great. Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, so when the accreditation team is looking both at the program review submission, the common standard submission, and then at the site visit, they're looking, you know, very broadly at the pass rates. They're also looking at how do syllabi include evidence of preparation for the TPEs and the TPA. They're also looking at what do your completers say about their preparation. So we'll look a little bit lower in this slide deck too at some examples of what the completer surveys look like and how candidates respond to their support from there. A really important piece, the site visit team is going to interview candidates, right? So we're going to have candidates in a room, either physically or on Zoom. And the site visit team will ask them, how did it go? How was the support? Now the team, it's a peer review system. The reviewers are from other programs, so they know that candidates will have things that they may feel stressed about, right? They expect to hear feedback about frustrations with this cycle or this rubric. I mean, they know people, everyone has frustrations with assessments in some ways. So, but really what they want to know is, yes, you felt that way, but what kind of supports did your program have? This is where a lot of times we hear about you, right? We hear about you as really individualized support and people that were really helpful in helping them through, areas that they needed more support. The PA support survey also is within the program, and so the team would be looking at that as well. And the kind of the overall questions are, at the bottom there, are the pass rates related to the curriculum? Do they have opportunities to practice what will be within the performance assessment? Is there that differentiated support, which is asked about in Common Standard 2? Or are there other reasons why the program may have a lower passage rate for candidates?
Mhm.
Let's
And
see.
there is a commission item coming up in this February meeting that Juliet spoke about in her keynote about the passing standard. So do take a look at that because that is part of the shifts of 1263 moving forward.
Okay. So again, for you Common Standards submitters and people working on that, you should know kind of this language pretty well. Common Standard 4 is all about continuous improvement. Um, when you submit your evidence to the commission, it's asking about almost a visual of the cycle of continuous improvement. So looking for your unit, across programs. So if you've got 3, 4, or 5 programs, this is asking about, does your leadership team look at the data, including performance assessment data? So are they collecting it? Are they analyzing it? And are they using it regularly and systematically to think about areas for program improvement? So this comes directly from that standard, and it should include multiple sources of data, including what's there from performance assessment. If you go to the next slide. So I think this is one where we're together on it, Marissa. So these are some examples of where you have specific performance assessment data.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in the resource guide, Results Analyzer is a program that is proprietary. It belongs to Pearson. And so we get the question a lot, is there a recorded webinar of how to operate Results Analyzer? No, there is not, because it is a proprietary thing. They don't want to put out their video of it. But we will be, I believe, coming up in February, and I'm not sure if it's the 12th or the 19th. There is going to be a results analyzer office hour. And I wanted to also check in with folks. If you do not know how to access your results analyzer, please email us. We can get you in contact with the Pearson folks who need to be able to either create or provide your login information. And some institutions, they haven't been able to log into Results Analyzer for a while, and so they haven't been able to access it, and so they're not getting that data. And it can be a challenge to use it. And so understanding the process and doing some results analyzer training, I know that the Pearson folks will meet individually with institutions and faculty and come together in a meeting for a demonstration of how to use that data. But it's very important to have everyone that is supposed to have access to it, their login information, even before that happens, so people can get inside the program and start to look at the data associated with their institution. And in the resource folder, I did put a results analyzer PDF handout, I believe. If I did not, I'll verify. But it was also included in all the coordinator meeting pieces because there are screenshots of how to use results analyzer. But again, there is no YouTube video. Pearson will not create one of a demonstration of how to do that. It's just attending the live sessions where they have trainings. And like I said, it'll be it's either next Thursday or the Thursday after, when they will be having an hour of office hours for people to come and ask questions. So that was my part of talking about Results Analyzer.
Great. Um, and then as we mentioned, there's the data dashboards where you're submitting data each year during into the ADS system, but also that populates with the pass rates and the completer surveys and mentor surveys that come in. The team is also thinking about quantitative versus qualitative data. So thinking about where are candidates, seeing challenges and where could there be modifications or improvements. If we go to the next slide, this is more specific to really what is the site visit team looking for in this feedback loop of continuous improvement. So they're looking to see that your continuous improvement is deliberate and explicit. They want to see what data is reviewed. When is it being reviewed throughout the year? Who's involved with it? How do you document any changes? And who is making sure that it happens routinely? So, we have a lot of site visits where there's one very key person to the programs, right? We have one program coordinator or one director of the program. They've got a lot on their plate. The team is always looking for, especially at the common standard level, what sort of support do you have from the unit overall to make sure this is happening year over year, that it's not just sporadic, but it's happening deliberately and explicitly.
Mhm. So would you say that the team is looking for just like regularity of meetings and that that key participants are there and keeping agendas and minutes as evidence? Is that a good indicator?
Yeah, I think so. And I would say this is a question at almost every large site visit that I do. I would say Common Standard 4 is almost, always in the team's mind as far as is this just happenstance that people are looking at data and thinking about it, or is there an actual system in place that's continuous and that's documented throughout the year?
Mhm. And as a PA team, we pull data on a quarterly basis and take a look and report out to coordinators. But also, we utilize that data in making those iterative changes from one version year to the next. And so, looking at where pinch points are to be able to look at rubric specific data is an important thing to potentially, we do it statewide. It could be a potentially very valuable thing to do program wide to see where some of these pieces are and understandings of faculty and mentors around some of the pieces. One of the things I remember when I was in program was that we had our mentor teachers, district employed supervisors, mentors, that didn't necessarily understand what the candidates needed to do for the teacher performance assessment. And so we had to make an adjustment based on our continuous improvement to include an hour in their 10 hours of the work that the mentor teachers do every year, the 10-hour training. We
Yep.
added a little asynchronous thing in there to explain their role in supporting a candidate through the teacher performance assessment. And that greatly improved the candidate's experience because uh, the question we would get is, I never had to do a TPA. I don't even know anything about this thing. But did you plan a lesson? Have you taught it? Have you monitored instruction? Have you reflected? Have you thought about changes? Well, you absolutely have done a teacher performance assessment, just not under the name. So.
Right. And I think we're moving from the common standards into the program standards. Or does anyone have a question, I think, before we move to the program about kind of the common standard thinking of how does the unit look at data? Feel free to jump in as needed. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Marissa.
So program-specific requirements, preparing candidates toward the mastery of these TPEs or CAPEs. So depending upon what performance assessment the candidate is completing. It's designed to measure the candidate's competency and the results inform where candidates are successful and where they may need additional support. And then it should inform, data should inform improvements or modifications needed to coursework or clinical practice. And so, just like I said in that, example of looking at the data, checking in with instructors, and the one of the major shifts with the LPA for multiple subjects and EdSped and PK3 candidates is that understanding of, like, for example, like foundational reading skills. And we've had faculty that have come to many, many different meetings and say, if you think that your candidates know what foundational reading skills are, make sure you tell them again, because it is a challenge for folks to really understand all of the different components of the ELA, ELD framework. And understanding that two different themes have to be interwoven into these 3 to 5 lessons in a direct systematic and explicit approach. There's a lot of different pieces in there. And so by taking a look at PA data, and can help to target some of the different expectations that are required now, given the literacy and the SB 488 and the literacy certification process that were explicitly put into some of these syllabi. So that's a that's an example of where it is from the LPA, and that's what's been on my mind a lot lately. Their clinical practice experience. And we get a lot of questions about alternative sites. And if you're here from one of those APA programs and maybe your candidate's working in a juvenile hall facility or someplace like that where they're unable to meet some of the requirements of filming, there are some different accommodations that folks can engage with. They just need to contact us at one of our email addresses. But the clinical practice site should be a place where they can meet the teacher performance expectations or the CAPEs. They absolutely should be, they should have opportunities to practice. They should have access to knowledgeable mentors and supervisors. And they should also receive some critical and constructive feedback so they can continue to grow. And the importance of the clinical practice placement can't be overstated. And the most supportive clinical practice spaces allow for candidates to really learn from experienced educators and to really grow.
Marissa, I get questions a lot from programs about is this placement acceptable? Number one, to earn the credential, and number two, for the TPA. You mentioned that kind of at the beginning. What is the correct process? I mean, they ask me, what I'm usually telling them is, who is your TPA coordinator? Let's check in with them at your program and then confirm with the model sponsor. Is that the correct kind of line of way you'd like people to think through it?
I think that that is a good way, a through line to think of it. We talked a little bit, and there were some questions even this morning during the keynote of what a model sponsor is. And
Yep.
so just even understanding that each model sponsor has their own procedures for ensuring that the clinical practice placement is appropriate. Like for the Cal TPA or the Cal APA, I got a question in the inbox yesterday about a placement that's at a preschool, and was that
Okay. Wow.
appropriate for engaging in the Cal APA? And yes, it's appropriate. The juvenile hall facilities, home-based facilities, some of these other spaces that it might not, the issue, it isn't not that it's not a placement that is appropriate for what they have to do in the credential. It's more for filming and for completing the performance assessment. And those are the thoughts to have. So but if we do have a plan for folks that are maybe an intern and in a home-based system, but there are certain stipulations, especially around like the early childhood special education credential, right?
Hmm.
They have to do the teacher performance assessment with children aged 3 and above. And
Hmm.
so if they're a 0 to 2 intern teacher completing that clinical that they need to have another placement where they're able to access children that meet the specifications of the performance assessment, and they are within the scope of that credential. But as we are starting with the ECSE credential, we're seeing more and more concerns pop up, and the best thing to do is to email us so we can have a specific plan, because a lot of times they're one-off things. We're not seeing like
Yep.
50 of them. We see three across the state, but those three teachers are very important, and we want to make sure that we are setting them up for success. So if you are with a student and or a candidate and they're seeking any type of preliminary credential, and you're looking at the TPA or the APA and saying, is this a place where they can be successful? Send an email, and then we can have a conversation if needed, or we could respond right away. Yes, the juvenile hall is fine. Here's the email, here's the documentation to be able to submit evidence that's not video, because
Yep.
that is acceptable. Um,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Great. Great.
Any other questions about clinical practice? I know that that ends up being a question for a lot of folks as well. Okay. Implementation of the performance assessment, administration of the performance. There you go. Placements that allow for video recording. That's an important component. It's a performance assessment. It's a lot of it is based on video and reflection. If the candidate is in a placement that does not allow for video recording, again, we do have alternative ways of capturing that evidence, but I would say that it's often easier for the candidate if they are able to do video recording. Then the program wants to be able to maintain some of that level data and use their data for reporting accreditation and program improvement. Like we were saying earlier, having a regularly scheduled data review when, like today, well, last night, submissions for Cal TPA and Cal APA, it was a score reporting night. And so folks got that score report. You probably got the email in the morning about your candidate's passage on these performance assessments and exams. And, maybe timing those meetings with that cadence might help, just depending upon who's in your unit and how that would work. But it should be clear, accurate information that the candidates are getting from you based on the model sponsors' documents for that academic year. There should be multiple places to prepare candidates for some of these performance assessment tasks. And we've heard from many programs this week, just in this conference, about excellent things that they have done in order to embed some of those tasks for the performance assessment and to think about them in this formative space. Oftentimes, the Cal TPA and the Cal APA are more summative than formative. It really should be information that folks have, as they have gone through program, and it's a showcase of what they know. But the very first time I taught a credential level course, I asked candidates to we were modifying things to make adaptations for what would be focus students, and I asked them to bring a lesson plan to class, and then we were going to together modify these. And one of the candidates brought a lesson plan that was so, like, it covered like 500 years of history. And I was like, that's one lesson? 45 minutes? You're sure? He's like, yes, it's one lesson, right? Each standard has to be one lesson, right? And I remember thinking, I'm like, who's, I'm supposed to be teaching you this stuff. And so, it's an opportunity for him to really say, okay, well, what is doable in 45 minutes? And not, this candidate honestly thought that you have to address each standard each day. Like, that's how the standards work. And so that right there was a formative opportunity for me to explain how the standards work and how they're taught over, time, and how scoping and sequencing goes. And when you do your performance assessment for cycle one, because he was a single subject candidate, it's going to be one lesson, one teaching period of whatever that block looks like. It's not this big extended thing. And that demystifies some of the performance assessment, because a good friend of mine, he's a math teacher. He always says inch by inch, math is a cinch. And so oftentimes with performance assessment, bit by bit, chunk by chunk, breaking things down, and that's you. That's what the faculty are. They are clear, accurate information. They provide multiple attempt or formative assessments. They also understand their candidates, and they also have to help candidates to understand it must be their own unique work. That was a question that we got about the AI checkers and some of those pieces. There is an AI forum coming up in March, but at this time, the Cal TPA and Cal APA are only screened for originality. So if two candidates submit so similar of work that it's 97% or so overlapping, then that will be screened. And so just talking to candidates about ways to leverage AI as a tool and responsibly use AI, but it does absolutely need to be their own work. And programs also need to provide remediation and support. Candidates may need additional support around one component or another, and there needs to be a plan for how that's going to be done. And in a supportive environment, and however it's organized at your institution, there absolutely needs to be a plan for it. And then implementation around assessor qualifications, trainings, scoring, reliability. If the performance assessment is centrally scored, then those pieces are in place within the model sponsor system. But understanding and getting training, and it is very, very supportive of of understanding exactly how a candidate is scored, and the performance assessment is reviewed. It's very helpful. But at this time, the only way to get that training is to be hired by one of the model sponsors, either their contractor or their organization. But we are working to put out some faculty workshops that will take faculty through the process that assessors go through without the calibration at the end, because that's not necessary for faculty, but understanding how to go through and identify information and evidence based on a rubric for Cal TPA and Cal APA is a very important part of being able to support a candidate.
Marissa, on this standard, I do wonder if programs worry about this for accreditation. I wonder, and honestly, because I do a lot of visits, I don't see this one come up very often. I think that's a good thing. You know, the list of acceptable, excuse me, required, acceptable, unacceptable supports. And I'll put in the chat too. You probably all have it, but the PSA that clarified last year gave some additional clarification to those acceptable, unacceptable supports. But I'm curious if programs worry about this at all, about getting, you know, some sort of standard finding on this around their supports. Do you hear from programs around this one, or are there any programs that want to share, their thoughts on, that acceptable versus unacceptable supports?
We absolutely do hear from programs about this, and when asked about this, and there's another presentation that I'm doing this afternoon or after this about acceptable supports.
Oh,
But
okay.
no,
Okay.
but truly the big thing is, whose work is it? If you ask yourself, is this my work? Am I telling the candidate exactly what to do, telling them what part of the video, and then saying, if you submit this, I guarantee you'll pass?
Right.
Is that happening? Or are you saying, if the candidates, is this going to be good enough? Or what do you think?
Right.
And
Right.
drawing out some of the questions from them. But when they give you what they think, and then it's absolutely not addressing the stand, like if you find that you're talking to a candidate and they have absolutely no idea how to read the English language development standards and how they tie to their associated, you can absolutely work with them to correct that. That's a teaching moment. You can
Sure.
provide candidates with lots of resources. You can narrow the field of things that you provide them to say, okay, well, we want to do something around English language development. Here are some different strategies that might work. Don't, as long as you're saying do this strategy, it will work, right?
Mhm.
That's the unacceptable support. But
Okay.
acceptable is saying, here are three things. What do you think? Why don't you have a conversation with your cooperating teacher about how things like this have worked before?
Great.
And I think that because performance assessment says assessment in it, that people think it's a test that you go do in a room by yourself, and if you get any kind of help on it, it's not a reflection of your knowledge, skills, or abilities. But
Yep.
I liken it to a doctoral dissertation. Again, I did that process, and without my faculty mentor, without my dissertation chair, going back and forth with me, having conversations, sending me articles, reading my stuff, and saying, yeah, this is terrible. You need to go back and start again. Or it's saying, wow, this is really good. I really enjoyed this part. And what do you think about adding this or this? Right? That work was mine. It was my work, but it was enhanced by the support I received from that mentor. And so, as you are working with candidates, as your faculty are mentoring, as your faculty mentors, as cooperating teachers are mentoring, if as long as it's not their work, if it's work they constructed together. Let's say a
Right.
cooperating teacher sits down with a candidate and says, okay, you're going to do this mini unit on the literacy performance assessment. Let's look at what we do for foundational skills. Let's look at what we do for some of these additional themes. Let's think about a plan where you could plan this out and do your 3 to 5 lessons this week. Let's talk about it. That's absolutely acceptable. That's encouraged. Um, the problem is where where if a cooperating teacher says, well, do this, this, and this, here's the lesson plans, and you just do them. That doesn't allow the candidate to work through it. It doesn't allow them to engage in that messy middle, that productive struggle of getting through some of the work and building them into being the teacher they could be. Does
Yep.
that?
Yeah.
And I think we got a
I,
couple things in the
I'm yeah, and
chat.
I'm very jealous because I had to take the bar exam and they wouldn't let me get help from anyone. So this is not that kind of situation. Um, no, yeah, we got some good comments. Mel says university supervisors worry a lot about their levels of acceptable support. Gordon talked about exemplar submissions, whether candidates really are allowed to see exemplar submissions.
Absolutely. Please
Crystal,
collect exemplar submissions within your program. I would make sure that when you get a candidate that gets, really good scores and you want to use their exemplar, just make sure you talk to them and make sure it's okay that you share it. And then also when you're sharing it within program, make sure you absolutely let those candidates know it is not to be uploaded to YouTube. It is not to be put into the public domain. Parents sign permission slips. People acknowledge they're going to be captured on video without the intention of it being shared everywhere. But just be very careful when you're sharing these pieces within a program. But you absolutely can collect exemplars, and we will be putting out some exemplars most likely early next month that we have been
Oh,
collecting for both Cal TPA and Cal APA.
nice.
The issue is around the video and how it's capturing people's faces and children's faces and whether it's something we can put out in the public domain. And that's a question that it's actually with more of our legal team right now about those. And so I apologize. Everyone's like, where are these samples you sent in the spring? And so that's where it's at. And but you can absolutely collect a bank of exemplars within your program and share them with candidates. Um, I just would caution them about the originality. Once someone puts that in, it's already in the system. If they go through and say, well, this is exactly what I'd like to do, and then does the same thing, it'll hit for originality. But yeah.
Point. Well, and it's, I mean, right. And if we're talking about 10, 15 years ago, these were exemplars on physical paper. Now we're talking about sharing them, online. And so you've got copy and paste options. So just really making sure they understand that. So I think that's possibly good news, Gordon and Jenna, that discussion of exemplars.
Yeah. And Laura, I I absolutely know where where that from the distant past, the whole not allowed support came from. Yes, it is very confusing because I liken it to, once you learn something one way, it's hard to shift the mindset. But the the performance assessment was not intended to be done alone. It's intended to be done within that triangle support, their instructor, cooperating teacher, and faculty mentor, candidate in the middle, embraced by all, supporting them and moving them forward. And as many times as you can, make sure that you get that message out to faculty, to candidates, to cooperating teachers. And the line I always draw when talking about appropriate and acceptable and required supports versus unacceptable is whose work is it? And then also the we had someone come to office hours said, I ran my whole submission through ChatGPT and it told me I was absolutely going to pass and it didn't pass. We can't conjecture that someone's going to pass or not pass because there's no guarantee. Maybe the person conjecturing that it would pass might have a misunderstanding of something in the rubrics. And so it's important to say that these are the rubric constructs. If there is evidence that is identified by an assessor, then it would meet that construct. But saying, I guarantee if you do this, you'll pass, sounds like a unacceptable support. Laura.
I just wanted to add in relation to my comment that I don't think that that is the prevailing attitude today about TPAs. I think it is dying out, but there are people who've been around long enough who remember that back in the day, they explicitly were not allowed to even, it was like top secret. They couldn't even get any feedback from anybody about their TPAs. So there was a great deal of mystery when the TPAs were in their early existence.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that's dying out now. It's not something I run into much anymore, but it is historically significant. But I think as you've acknowledged, I think the bigger challenge today is this AI um, situation that we have and teaching people how to use AI for refinement, perhaps, but not for the origination of the ideas in their submissions. And I will just add, and this won't surprise anybody, but that's not just that's how to use AI effectively and ethically is not just a TPA problem. That is a problem all over the place with all kinds of things. So that I think that's our modern day challenge as a society.
No, absolutely.
All right. Let's
Yeah.
and feel free. I think we will have a little bit of time, hopefully, at the end for additional questions too. So,
Mhm.
okay, great. So I think this is the last standard we wanted to highlight that makes us think specifically about performance assessment. That's the development of the IDP, the individual development plan, and that goes from the preliminary program to the clear program. So I know we have folks in here that have induction, and so there is an expectation from accreditation teams that when they're seeing IDP samples, that those would include feedback and areas from their performance assessment results that they could continue to strengthen during their induction experience. All right. So
Data dashboards.
yeah, we've mentioned the dashboards. They're publicly available, but we also bring them to our site visit teams. They're available to you as well, so make sure as a program that you know what's on there. But you should, because you're also engaged in submitting to the ADS system um, each year your own information. But the team is looking at this information. I will say that there's a lot of stuff in there, right? And the team can sometimes get almost overwhelmed by how many different places they could go. So do expect that, in preparation for your site visit, the team may still ask, hey, can you get this data for us? Can you provide us with the data? Um, and it's sometimes much more beneficial to hear it from you and also to hear kind of what's your process when you're looking at that particular data. So the expectation is that the data you see, the survey results, they're helping the institution. Also, commission staff are looking at these dashboards to see where things might need to be addressed. I know there's discussion going forward about use even more of data in accreditation. But right now we use it as a tool for the team. It is not the end all be all. So they're looking at the data and they're asking questions as a group and they're asking questions of you as program, right? They want to know the context behind the numbers, but they're not using them as, we're going to have an automatic finding in your site visit report because of a particular piece of data.
Ready to move on?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I think we come back to that. Okay. Yeah. So here's what it looks like in the dashboard for each rubric. So it's broken down by each rubric. This is for your program. And you'll see on the left, it has the institution. So this would be potentially your institution. And on the right is the state average. So the team is thinking about, okay, what is the mean for this program and what is the mean for the state and looking across. And of course, because the numbers are lower, the numbers are going to be much different when you're looking at a smaller sample size. So, but the expectation is that you're looking at this as a program, and if you look on the left there, let's see, there's some 1.8s, right? So rubric number 1.6, and I don't need to quiz you, Marissa, but as a program, you might look at rubric 1.6 and you're thinking, okay, is there something else that we can address in our courses, in our supervision to try to improve how candidates are performing in those particular areas. If you go to the next question, it turns from their scores on the assessment to their feedback to you as a program on how they felt prepared. Can you go to the next slide, Marissa?
Sure.
So this is showing the drop down of how the team finds responses from candidates. So they drop down here under performance assessment. Well, no, sorry. They drop down under the section overall, and at the bottom, it has specific questions to performance assessment. And then if you go to the next slide, it has the questions. So Okay, so here are some of the questions. You'll see again on the right is the state average. On the left is specific to your program. This is what candidates are saying or completers are saying about how they felt prepared for these different areas. They often sort of mirror each other, right? Like if you look at question 37, if you were not successful on it, how well did your program remediate? You had more people saying not at all. But this is coming from folks that are obviously, they may be understandably frustrated about their score and retaking. So the team understands that. They're looking at the results on the right, but this does give you some helpful formative feedback on how do candidates feel about their preparation. Any question from programs on kind of what these surveys look like and how the team might use them? All right. And again, as you're make sure you've got access to this and you're able to see the results from your surveys and from your candidate pass rates. Okay. I think this is still me, Marissa. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, where is this used in accreditation? Staff from the CTC are looking through the data, thinking about, passage rates for programs and where it might lead to a need for, change in curriculum, fieldwork, or supports. We offer a lot of technical assistance. My groups, so the general multiple single office hours that I host with Elizabeth and with Tim, those are once a month, but we're always available for questions other times. And then Marissa, can you remind us when your office hours are?
Sure, we have faculty office hours the first and third Friday of each month from 9 to 10 a.m. And Zoom links are found on the performance assessment window of the CTC or page on the CTC's website. We also have candidate office hours every Wednesday from 4:15 to 5 p.m. for both Cal TPA and Cal APA. So candidates can come directly talk to us or ES of Pearson. ES of Pearson is at both candidate office hours and faculty office hours. So, and the website and the Zoom link for those are also on the website. In addition to office hours, we host a monthly digging deeper session where we take a look at data and have a plan for inviting programs and also sometimes just Cal PA team to talk about an issue. We have our PLCs the second Friday of each month, one for the TPA and one for the APA, where we talk about it's an open forum for folks to talk about issues as we go along. We also have coordinator meetings twice annually, one in the winter and one in the summer, to take a look at the data and see what it is, what picture it's painting of California and performance. And we do have separate coordinator meetings for Ed Sped, for multiple single world language, and for Cal APA as well. And then we do have our deep dives every fall. We try to do them when we go through the materials that are coming up for each academic year. And all of these meetings are recorded, put onto our YouTube channel. And we do often get candidates who watch some of these seminars to get more information to support them. And we've had faculty email us, can I assign this maybe to my candidates so they can watch it as part of support for their performance? Absolutely. Any clips that you pull, PowerPoint slides, anything that we provide, it's all in the public domain to support candidates, to support faculty, to support cooperating teachers, to bring everyone along as we are working through and looking at data and understanding how the performance assessment is supported and how we support folks. And then also we do have our emails. Please feel free to send emails to us if you have questions. We do our absolute best to stay on top of those inboxes.
Great. The last point here is, PA data really statewide is used to inform the commission, you know, educational partners and other communities of interest about the validity and reliability of the performance assessments. So, as you know, the commission looks at that statewide to think about those areas. There's, can you go to the next slide? As we've talked about, you're providing information about performance assessment during program review and common standards review. And we see evidence of that within your handbooks, candidate materials, syllabi, knowing who is involved, the remediation and support for candidates, and other documentation. It's in those dashboards that we've talked about for passage rates and performance by rubric. It's talked about during site visits. So during interviews with candidates, faculty, district supervisors, the TPA coordinator, and the site visit team weighs all of it. And again, at the bottom there, right, it emphasizes that point that it's used as a point of inquiry, not as the end all be all on a finding on a standard.
So one angry candidate who shows up will not
That's
tip
right.
the scales in one way or another. But if there's a whole group of them, perhaps that might be taken into consideration by the team as they review.
Yeah, and I would say on a site visit, again, right, it's a peer review. We're used to having candidates express frustrations, you know, with any part of the program, including performance assessment. We always talk to the team about, you're going to hear complaints. It's almost more suspect if you hear nothing, right? Like if everybody just says, we love every part of it, we have no complaints, and everything is very straightforward and easy to complete. That's kind of the exception, right? We expect to hear good, positive and critical feedback, and we always tell the team members, when you hear that information, ask them, the next question you should ask is, okay, well, what do you do with your complaint? Where can you go to get support? Do you know who to talk to? And then usually we hear of a system of support there. And honestly, an open forum for them to feel comfortable enough to share their frustrations with you as a program.
So, what I linked here were the coordinator meetings that we had for Cal APA, Cal TPA, and EdSped, Cal TPA from this past January. And what I was thinking that we could do, and I know we do have some time, and I was thinking maybe we'll just kind of look at this as a group because we're kind of a small group, is think about what the data tells us and what conversations could happen at a program level. So I'm gonna just click and I hope that I'm sharing my screen, but I wonder if I'm just sharing this one window. Let me see. And you don't see what I just opened, right?
No.
Nope. Okay, so I'm gonna stop my share and then I'm going to share. Okay, let's see if this works here. Are you seeing this resource folder now?
Yes.
Okay, and then I'm going to open within the resource folder. We're seeing the Cal TPA presentation.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. The important thing is, that data review, and we very much so recognize that materials were put out significantly late this year. Typically, it's a July, there's a little hiatus in July for a couple of weeks, and then materials are published. This year, we were up against a lot of different deadlines where the materials for the LPA were not even approved until the end of the June commission meeting. And so that was part of the driver behind the hiatus. And then there were also technical issues. So this data absolutely reflected some of the issues and concerns. When looking at the Cal TPA, this is how many submissions were received during this window of August 1st through uh, December 11th, right? So this is the N, right? This is in the cycle or Cal TPA version 7. So the old version, people that still were finishing up something from last year. This was the numbers, and as you can see, the vast majority of candidates have moved over to version 1. And when we look at first attempt passage rates, these numbers include only scorable submissions. So if a candidate submitted a submission and it was not scorable, it was not counted as a first attempt. So it's only those that were scorable was considered. So if a single subject candidate accidentally leaves off 3 of their templates or something and they get a condition code, that doesn't count as their first submission. The next submission that's scorable would count as their first submission. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. I know it's a little confusing when you look at the data, but we looked only at the Cal TPA version 1 because that to me we need to look forward, right? And the passage rates are very high on first attempt. And when you look at the rubric mean score of all those submissions across the state, breaking it down by single subject, world language, multiple subjects, and PK3, um, we went through and identified the high points and then the lower points. And remember that a 3 meets the teacher performance expectation. So anything at a 3 or above is fantastic. Anything close to a 3 is good too. But when we start getting to the lower twos, that means the average included more ones. And so that's where a challenge can. And if you look just at the data, the N for world language is pretty low. There's only 45 submissions through that window. But when you look at multiple subjects, there's 1,171. So there's that to me is might be a little bit more valid because we are looking at more submissions across in a particular window. But just looking at this information, this is just the MPA. Um, on average, folks are doing pretty well. They need a 2 on every single rubric to meet the minimum passing standard. And a 3 meets the teacher performance expectation. And the reason for the standard being a little bit the 16 passing, 14 secondary was because of the newness of this assessment, right? But when we look, what stands out, right? If we're both multiple subjects and PK3, is this step 4 apply? Whereas in single subject and world language, they're not focusing on just math, they're focusing on their target language or they're focusing on their subject matter area. So these folks are doing better in that step. So what's happening? And that's a conversation to happen looking at statewide data. And so we pulled out some bright spots. Passage rates are 98 or above. That's pretty a strong indicator of good program support and candidates being able to move through. Um, and that the world language has significantly increased when compared to version 7. Some areas for growth and identifying those specific rubrics, like Jake said, in 1.6, which in the MPA is focusing on the actual teaching. That has improved significantly in this version as opposed to the previous version, but we're seeing some concerns around who focus students are and what we do with them in the rubrics when we look at multiple subjects. And so providing this slide was commission staff's way of saying, okay, maybe we need to just clarify who these focus students are and what we need to do for them. And so focus student 1, they require language adaptations. Focus student 2 requires academic content adaptations. And focus student 3, there needs to be adaptations to the environment to be able to include that student. So being able to look at data, being able to see trends, and then being able to address it is the important part of what should be documented for accreditation if you are having a regular cadence to these meetings, taking a look at your candidates' rubric specific data and saying, huh, there's this part right here, and we're having an issue about it in our program. We can see it across um, our program. Maybe we see it across certain demographics. Maybe we see it just with our interns and not with our traditional candidates. Then how do we target that? And that's what, in my mind, a lot of what continuous improvement is looking at. How are we using data to target specific entities within our program to improve practice for candidates? And PA data can be one point of how we do that. It's not the end all and be all, but it's one data point to be able to take a look at. So, and then there is access in the folder
Yeah.
to all of these. So, what was that?
I was going to ask that. Gordon had asked about sharing these slides. I see the slides that we did in the PowerPoint and then the results analyzer. Were you wondering about this one too, Gordon? I'm not sure if we have these slides in here, the coordinator meeting ones. You see them?
Let me see here. Let
Oh,
me stop my share and then let me take a look. So the coordinator slides are linked into the PDF of the document that I put into the folder. So let me just pull that up. So when I can just drop that resource into the chat.
okay.
But it's apologies for all the different layers of where these things are. But if you go into the PDF of the Meredith Fellows, it's like a pink thumbnail when you go into that folder. When you click on that, that's the presentation that we've been sharing today. And if you scroll to the
Oh,
20-second slide, there's a live link embedded into that. And that's where I put the so apology. I'll just share what
got
I'm
it.
looking at. That's where I put the live link here. And so if you wanted to click on the EdSped, then this is all the resources that we provided to EdSped coordinators and the navigating the results analyzer, the updated list of who is to be contacted, and all those pieces are there. And these folders are also available in the EQ Weekly. We did publish the EQ Weekly with these folders and the recordings of these meetings. So they are on the website as well. And today is the last day for if you have any feedback to provide to us for the performance assessment. We are seeking your feedback as we are working on redeveloping for version 2. And there are some specific things that we're hoping to target when we take a look. But if you have any feedback, we're looking for that by the end of today. So let me see here. Yeah. So if that's sorry if that was confusing. I didn't wasn't my
Okay.
intention. We're coming up to the end here. Um, are there any questions that we can address? I did post here some policy questions. If you have a question, I am looking at this template in Cal TPA, multiple subjects, cycle 2 or LPA, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do here. That's a CTC question. I have a candidate who has been on the phone with Pearson for 4 hours and can't get logged in. They have their old email address from their previous institution as their login, and now they're having to, provide all kinds of documentation and they can't get registered. That's an ES at Cal TPA Pearson. The Pearson folks have asked that we please do not provide that email address to candidates directly because all they will do is forward it over to customer service because they have to keep record of that. But if you are having a technical issue or on behalf of your candidate, then emailing that ES email address is helpful. Many of the resources that we talked about today are on our performance assessment website. Like I said, if you click on Cal TPA for candidates, this is the link to office hours. For you, These are the office hours that we typically host. A link to our webinar, all of the, well, these aren't very recent, but we do have access to our YouTube channel here. And if you're a Cal APA person, you just scroll a little bit further down to the Cal APA button. Um, but let me go ahead and stop my share. And Jake, anything to add as we close out today?
No, thanks everyone for attending and nice to see you. We'll see you soon in another virtual or in-person spot. Everybody. I like that fist bump, Kevin. Thank you.